Thank you, Nicholas. That kind of sounds a little bit more controversial than I think it's actually going to be, but anyway, let's see what happens. So welcome to a presentation where I'm going to look at NILM from a slightly different perspective to how we have for the last 2 days. So I'm not going to talk about algorithms, meters, sensors, ground truth data, validation methods, or anything like that. I'm going to try and answer one key question, which is, dude, where's my NILM solution? Okay, so what do I mean by this? Well, I would contend that NILM is perhaps a little bit like Marty McFly's hoverboard, or flying cars, or rocket packs, okay? Insofar as it's a technology that's been around quite a long time. We saw Ollie's chart yesterday that kind of said 10 years ago was when really work in this area rapidly ramped up. So it's been around a long time. It's had a lot of money thrown at it. It sounds cool, and it's meant to save the world. And I don't think it has, right? If we look objectively at where NILM is, the number of households and businesses that are using NILM-backed solutions, it's pretty small, right? If we look at the number of utilities who have NILM solutions generally available to their customers, so i.e. not in some glorified lab or pilot, it's very small. We've heard from a lot of NILM vendors, but actually if we look at them and say how many of them are making a profit, how many of them are growing rapidly, how many of them are about to be taken over by Google for $1 billion, it's really, really small, isn't it? So how come we're in that position? How come after 10 years, we aren't seeing this massive uptake of NILM in the market? And I'm going to share my perspective on that. I'll share 6 key interrelated observations about NILM as to why I think after 10 years, it feels like for those of us who've been around a long time, we haven't quite made 10 years progress. And because that's all a little bit pessimistic, I'll also share a few ideas about how maybe the industry could change a little bit to make the next 10 years much more successful. And hopefully that will act as a bit of a stimulus to the discussion afterwards. But anyway, before that, who the hell am I? So I'm someone who's been working in the world of energy analytics for my whole career. And for the last 4 or 5 years, in particular, in the world of energy advice, energy efficiency, and NILM. So we haven't heard from Onzo. They're one of the founding NILM companies, one of the most established. I was their CIO for a couple of years. So I've seen NILM from the point of view as a vendor. I was then at Innogy, and at Innogy, big German utility, I led their technical evaluation of NILM vendors. I advised their venture capital group on investing in a number of the companies that are in this room. And I developed and launched in beta a NILM-backed energy engagement solution in the UK and Netherlands. And it's also used in Germany, and parts of it are also used in Fresh, who we heard from yesterday. So there I saw NILM from the point of view of a customer, as an end user, and as an investor. And I also have continue to work occasionally with Toshiba, putting NILM inside their smart home products. So I've seen NILM from a number of different dimensions. Before I go on though, I guess just 2 caveats. So what I'm not talking on behalf of any of these organizations. I'm talking on behalf of myself and my current paymasters. And also, my NILM experience comes in the world of providing solutions to domestic customers in Europe, generally using 1 to 10 second data. Okay, so if you assume that's the home base from which my observations come, we might forage off into other areas along the way, but just bear in mind, that's kind of the world I know best. So, what are the reasons why NILM perhaps not taken off? Well, firstly, I'm going to talk about cake quite a bit in this talk, just because I'm a bit, I've got a sweet tooth. NILM, for a long time, was presented as a solution. Okay, we heard it yesterday described as a solution looking for a problem, but I would contend NILM isn't even a solution. We have to think, NILM, what is it? Okay, NILM is a data refinement technology. Okay, it takes a raw product, energy data, and it turns it into some more data. But to get any value from that, you then have to do some further processing to turn it into a full solution. So by analogy, it's a little bit like taking sugarcane, that's our energy data, and refining it into sugar. That's what NILM does. But we have to bake a cake with it. We have to combine it with some other ingredients to get a product which consumers actually get excited about and are willing to pay for. And the main cake that we have baked with NILM is energy advice. And that's the one I'm going to talk about most as we go through. But the first challenge is very much, it's taken us quite a long time to realize that NILM in itself is not the answer to a question. It's merely an ingredient to a solution that we have to work up. The second challenge, and I think we've touched on this quite a lot in terms of accuracy, but more broadly, we need to think about expectation. And what I've seen over the years is a big expectation gap between what NILM provides and what utilities and end users expect NILM to deliver. So if we think of an appliance, a fridge, I guess it could be an industrial appliance as well. Well, what do we want to know if I'm a utility or an end customer? I want to know how much energy it used, when it was used, but I also want to use those things sort of towards the top right. I want to know what type of appliance it is, whether it's faulty, how efficient the appliance is, and I'm kind of hoping that you can tell me lots about the user as well, and their lifestyle and their behavior. And I'll give you an example of the expectation gap that's built up. And it's not an expectation gap between 70% and 80% disag, it's a huge gap. One NILM vendor, who I'm not going to name because they're in the room and it will be embarrassing for them. One NILM vendor came to me when I worked at Energy and they said, we can detect from 10-second data when the lights are turned on in the hallway and the bathroom at night. And from that, we can infer when people are going to the toilet. And from that, our algorithms allow you to infer that someone has a medical problem with their bladder. Kind of that's okay. I like that. I thought, okay, we could maybe make some money out of this. This is pretty exciting. Sounds a lot better than what I was expecting. Guess what? Okay. Can you disag lighting that well off 10-second data? Not particularly. Can you tell me what room it's in? No. Can you validly infer the medical health of the person in the home? No. I knew that. Unfortunately, the 4 other people from Energy who I sat with took quite a while to realize that what they had heard was a load of bullshit. So there's this big expectation gap that we have to close. And when we do that, then expectations will be aligned. I would just highlight that there are 2 ways to close a gap. One is the improvement of solutions, and that's what we've talked about here. But 2 is the lowering of expectations. So if you're a utility sat in the room, please don't go away from today thinking, NILM's great, I just need to wait for it to meet my expectations. Start thinking about how can I change my expectations about what NILM can do, and how can I work with what NILM can produce today? Then you might actually make some money sometime in reasonable timeframes. So that's challenge number 2. Challenge number 3. To explain, I have to introduce you to my tech tax box. So this is a box of unloved and unwanted bits of IoT technology that I use as a footrest under my desk. And I'll come back to it to explain why I'm showing it in a moment. But I also have to to explain this point, share what it is I think utilities are hoping to get out of NILM and energy engagement solutions. So utilities are trying to move from a world where they have infrequent, unpleasant engagement with their customer. So once every 3 months, they send them a bill. That's it. It's not a very nice engagement. Utilities have been trying to get to a world where they have frequent, light touch, valuable engagement with their customers. And if you go back 10 years ago, I started working on smart metering. We all thought then smart metering would be the answer to this, that we'd give people a smart meter and a display device, much like that one in the top right-hand corner, and lo, will the customer be engaged with their energy and will they love their energy supplier? Well, it doesn't quite work like that with smart metering, because this February I got my smart meters after 10 years of working on smart metering, and after 2 days, I just put the display in the bin, really. Well, I put it in my tech chat box to be precise. So we then learned that smart metering doesn't give that frequent, regular engagement with the customer. And then the utility industry thought, maybe NILM. Maybe NILM is the vehicle to give me frequent, regular, light touch engagement with my customer. It doesn't, okay, or certainly not in its current incarnations. So NILM provides your customers with an education about their energy. But after 1 or 2 days of using it, interest can really drop off from customers. Once you've learned that your heating uses a lot more energy than you actually realized, once you learn that lighting is actually really cheap in your home, you're done in many respects. People don't come back to energy data, disaggregated or otherwise, every day, because there are far more exciting and fascinating things to do in their life. So this has been one of the constraints on NILM take-up, because utilities were expecting it to solve that need or that desire to have regular engagement with their customers, and it hasn't. And I'll come back later to talking about, well, maybe should we reframe how we use NILM? Right, okay, so if you like, the last point was thinking very much from the perspective of let's call it a customer director. Let's think about things from the point of view of the finance director. And the challenge we really have with NILM over recent years has been the cost of it. Now, let's think for a moment about a NILM solution, a NILM-backed energy insight solution, which you or I could buy today off Amazon. What do they cost? Circa £200 for one that actually works. So I could go there, spend £200. What do I save as a consumer? Well, the average electricity bill in the UK is £600 a year. Let's say I can reduce that by 5% with some behaviour change. So I can save, if my maths are right, £30 a year. So I spend £200 and I save £30 a year. It's a crap investment, okay? And that's why the consumer-facing NILM solutions, in part, have remained a niche entity. It's something just for the green evangelists and the tech lovers, not for the mass market. If we think about the economics for a utility to offer NILM, or a NILM-backed energy insight solution, well, I think you can get a cost down to about £15, £20 all in. So hardware, cloud platform, software, app development, fulfillment, customer support. £15, £20 doesn't sound a lot, does it? An energy retailer, if you strip out all of their pass-through costs, so things like buying the energy, network charges, their whole business runs on about £150 per customer per year. So NILM would add 10% onto their cost base. Not viable, is it? Okay. Well, it's certainly a very, very hard sell. And this has been a real constraint, a real realization, a real wake-up call for those of us who've sat on the other side, and not as vendors, trying to pilot this technology. So there's a real need for us to think how we can get that cost down by an order of magnitude. So that's our fourth challenge, 2 to go. Out of interest, how many of you in the room are utilities looking at NILM solutions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 hands, I saw that. NILM shopping is horrible. I would contend it's a less enjoyable shopping experience than taking a toddler shopping. It's horrific. And it's horrific for a number of reasons. Firstly, as a utility or anyone buying a new technology, you don't really know what you want. Okay? You don't know what's out there. I mean, I could go and buy a breakfast cereal and I know what I want because I've been buying them for years. A NILM solution, not so sure. But it's also hard because of the vendor landscape. So we've heard from a lot of vendors over the last 2 days. I did a little count up the other day, but active in the UK, there is 1 NILM or energy insight vendor for every 3 energy retailers in the UK. That says to me that there is a massive oversupply of products and services in the market. It also says to me that there's a lot of people going to go out of business in the next few years as well. I'm sorry to tell you that. So if you're trying to buy a NILM solution, there's a huge number of companies to choose from. They all describe their services in completely different ways. They all describe the performance of their services in different ways. I mean, come on, how many methods of evaluating NILM performance have we seen? It's an unfathomable world to try and navigate as a customer. And what does that lead to? It's led to a disease called pilotitis. Okay? Now, pilotitis, I see a few people laughing. You know where I'm coming from this. Pilotitis is the condition whereby a large company is unable to get beyond a pilot. You know, in fact, one of the people who put their hands up a moment ago to say they're in a utility told me that they're preparing to run their annual NILM pilot. So it's just what they do every year. Well, we've done a NILM project. It didn't quite meet our expectations. It was a bit expensive. Another 10 NILM vendors have come along. Let's do another pilot. It's a real challenge. So somehow we have to get beyond that if the vendors that are sat in this room are to reach any form of economic scale, and NILM is going to make any form of meaningful impact in homes and businesses across the UK and Europe. So selecting a NILM vendor is a real challenge. And then the final one. Okay, thinking back to cake. Okay, so what cakes can we bake using NILM? And actually what I've talked all about is energy insights. And the reason I've talked about energy insights is because generally we've looked in this kind of quite sequential way with NILM. We've said we can deploy it to lots of people, to give them advice and insights about their energy use. And then if we do that, there's loads of other cool things we can do on top. So we talk about assisted living, so spotting when people have maybe not woken up in the morning, we can send an ambulance around automatically. We've heard about appliance cross-sell, we've heard about maintenance, we've also heard about integrating into demand-side response solutions. The great challenge is that none of these are proven in any form of commercial scale. So we heard from Fresh yesterday, and I love Fresh, and Fresh are doing some really great market tests. But I can only actually think of one application of NILM in the world which isn't about energy insights, which is live and generally available to customers. And I'm not going to say who it is because I'm not sure I'm meant to know. But okay, lots of vendors, lots doing energy insights, but only one deployment in the world that I know of doing anything other than energy insights live with customers. And again, that's been a constraint because when you're just talking about theory, about ideas, how real is it? How certain am I that I will make some money from NILM? Feeling pessimistic at the moment? Okay, yeah, sorry. I'll try and bring it back up a little bit with the last slide and just talk about a few ideas and thoughts about, okay, well, what might change things? So first off, in the top left-hand corner, I talked about how we use energy insight to engage customers. And I said what utilities are looking for has been this frequent light touch engagement. Well, I'm starting to wonder whether that's a bit of a stupid idea, actually. And what we should be looking for is far less frequent, but much more deeper, much more meaningful insights around your energy use. So I'm kind of starting to think maybe with NILM, we should be thinking, how does it support a monthly or even quarterly cadence with a customer and to make that engagement much more rich, rather than trying to shoot for some form of Facebook feed style energy solution that engages the customer every hour about their use of their kettle and their toaster, because I don't think that's success. So I think less frequent, more meaningful engagement could be a way ahead. Secondly, those use cases beyond energy insights, I think it might be worth us now saying, not we're going to do those once we've nailed energy insight, but saying, how can I deliver them now? Where are the niches in the market? Is it like what Fresh are doing with dishwasher tablet cross-selling? Is it about assisted living? Can I find a market out there which actually brings some revenue in? Because the fundamental challenge, which I didn't touch on with energy insights, is consumers don't pay for it. Okay, it's just a cost to the utility. But if we can turn it into a solution that the customer is willing to pay for, then you open up a whole new opportunity space. So I think we should look at that. Top right, integration into smart home, and I couldn't fit it on neatly, smart meters. So that cost stack of NILM is hurt really badly by the need for all these extra sensors, CADs, and all these kind of bits of plastic and wires. If you can put NILM inside some other tech which is already in the home, whether it's Alexa or a Discover G smart meter or whatever, I don't actually care. But if you can do that, you open up a large number of people who already have some form of platform hardware in their business or in their home, but you also reduce your cost stack significantly. Then the ones at the bottom. I said when I was talking about buying a NILM solution that it's a particularly unpleasant experience. Some things which would really help that. One, a common definition of NILM services. It would be delightful if the NILM vendors got together and actually came up with some common definition of services. It happens in other industries. The hotel, the travel transport industry have certain definitions of services around standards of room and such like. It'd be great if NILM did that and energy advice did it more broadly. It would be amazing if there were open, independent performance assessments that didn't cost lots of money and didn't take a year to do. Okay. I know there are lots of you who are going to go, aren't there lots of things already? They're not fit for purpose, in my humble opinion. So it'd be great if, rather than hearing that vendor A scored themselves at 80%, vendor B is very good, and vendor C is improving, and vendor D is B+, that actually there was a way of comparing like with like against a common definition of service. And finally, there's a regret cost risk with NILM, that you might go with a vendor but then want to swap them a year later. And that's a barrier to adopting NILM. What could mitigate that is linked with the common definition of NILM services, a common API standard, a common interface layer for NILM. Because then as a utility, you can swap your vendors much more easily, which makes it much easier for the first vendor to get in there. Okay, so I think that's roughly it. So what have I covered? Okay, so I've hopefully sapped all enthusiasm out of the room. I've shared 6 reasons why I think after 10 years of concerted effort in NILM, we're maybe not as far ahead as we are, but hopefully I've seeded a few ideas as to how the next 10 years might see us getting to a point where there's lots of homes and lots of businesses taking advantage of NILM technology. So thank you.